Hey guys, tonight we're crawling under the rough, straw-stuffed blankets of a time long gone, when people slept on hay, shared beds with strangers, and believed that demons, dreams, and moon phases all had a say in how well you slept. We're plunging straight into the wonderfully weird world of medieval sleep habits, where pillows were frowned upon and midnight bathroom trips involved no plumbing and lots of judgment. Picture it: the glow of a dying tallow candle, the scratch of rats in the corner, and your very uncomfortable body trying to relax on a sack of hay. You're in for a cozy nightmare, basically. But don't worry, you probably won't survive this, historically speaking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into your humble wooden dwelling. The wind's howling outside, just enough to rattle the shutters but not enough to drown out the groaning of the floorboards as you step in. You're tired, your joints ache from tilling the fields or tending to goats, and your one great wish tonight is to collapse into something even remotely comfortable. What awaits you isn't exactly a modern mattress. It's a straw-filled sack laid atop a slatted wooden frame or directly on the hard-packed dirt floor. The straw's not fresh. It was replaced, perhaps during last month's Saint's Day. Maybe. You plop down and immediately regret it. Flecks of dried grass jab your back, and something suspiciously alive wriggles near your thigh. That's not a surprise. Most medieval bedding doubles as a cozy haven for fleas, lice, and the occasional mouse. Don't even think about bed bugs. They're already thinking about you. The walls around you are drafty. There's a faint layer of smoke clinging to the rafters. A gift from the central hearth that's been crackling all evening. No chimney. Of course, that's a luxury. You've been breathing that same smoke all day, and now it lingers like an unwanted bedtime story. You tug a blanket over yourself. It's more like a coarse woolen sheet that smells faintly of sheep, old onions, and unspoken generational trauma. It's not enough, and you curl your legs up to conserve warmth. You hope your neighbors in the next cottage over are at least decent enough to stop singing by midnight. At your feet, a dog curls up, because warmth is warmth, and neither of you are picky. Pets and livestock often shared sleeping spaces in peasant homes. Chickens might roost in a corner. And if you're lucky, the cow isn't in a mood tonight. You close your eyes. Try not to think about the straw poking you in the armpit. Try not to think about how people believed illness could fester in a room without proper airflow. The irony being, if you open a window, you're inviting in cursed drafts, thieving spirits, or worse, thieves with body odor. Historians still argue whether these poor sleep conditions actually impacted longevity or were just seen as the norm. After all, no one expected comfort, they expected survival. If you woke up not covered in welts or shivering violently, that was a pretty good night. Your ears tune into the house's nightly soundtrack: someone snoring, someone coughing, something rustling. Maybe it's a rat, maybe it's your sibling rolling over, maybe it's both. It's hard to imagine now. But this space, this pile of straw, this blanket of wool and unspoken suffering, is your safe place. People didn't just sleep in beds. They were born in them, fell ill in them, and often died in them. Beds weren't just furniture, they were stages for life's big moments. Albeit itchy, lumpy stages. You start to drift off, lulled by the creak of your own spine. Somewhere nearby, a candle sputters out. Darkness wraps around you like another layer of wool. A blessed relief, until someone else comes stumbling in, drunk from the tavern, trying to find their place beside you without stepping on the dog or waking the chickens. That's life. That's bedtime. That's the medieval way. And just when you think you've found a groove in the straw that doesn't jab your kidneys, something tickles your ear. Might be a flea, might be divine punishment. Either way, you scratch, turn over, and hope no one else is waking up for their turn at the chamber pot. Tomorrow you'll shake out the straw. Or not. Maybe next week, you'll fluff it with your hands, smooth the worst of the lumps, and hope the new batch doesn't come with bonus wildlife. Eventually, sleep wins. You sink deeper, ignoring the cold spot on your foot and the soft thud of something falling in the corner. You've made it through another medieval bedtime. Sort of. You stir, just a little. Your neck has that crick again, the one that reminds you that in this century, pillows are not exactly pillowy. You shift your head to the side, trying to find a spot that doesn't feel like you're lying on bundled kindling. Spoiler: there isn't one. In the dim haze of early night, you reach beneath your head and feel it, a sack of rags. Maybe some dried moss, perhaps a bit of folded linen if you're lucky. If you're nobility, it might be goose down, or swan feathers if you're obnoxiously wealthy and willing to pluck nobility from a bird. But for most folks, it's a hard roll of cloth, a piece of wood carved to vaguely resemble head support, or even, yes, just the plain floor. Pillows weren't exactly trusted in many corners of medieval society. In some religious communities, they were thought to be signs of sloth, or worse, vanity. Too much comfort at bedtime? That's the devil's soft whisper inviting you into indulgence. Some monks even believed that a pillow between the head and the earth was like trying to build a wall between yourself and humility. So, naturally, no thanks. Historians still argue whether these anti-pillow sentiments were widespread or isolated to the more zealous orders. But written records show many households skipping the soft stuff entirely, especially among the working poor. And let's be honest, in most homes, there was no spare stuffing to go around. Every scrap of wool was already in use, and feathers were busy keeping chickens warm. You turn your head again and wince. That knot in your neck? It's medieval, baby, and it's not going anywhere. To make things more complicated, there was a surprisingly political element to head support. In certain courts, embroidered cushions were signs of favor, rank, or religious status. Owning a luxurious pillow could be a statement. Look how close to God I am. Or perhaps, look how far I am from a hay-filled peasant life. So of course, these things became controversial. Meanwhile, your neighbor down the road probably rests their head on a chunk of firewood that's been smoothed down with decades of forehead oil and generational despair. You start to wonder, what even makes a good pillow in this time? A bundle of oats? A soft piece of linen tied in a knot? Goose feathers were coveted, but expensive. Wool clumped easily. Even moss got moldy, especially when you drooled on it in your sleep. Don't pretend you don't. Let's also take a moment to appreciate the horrifying medieval belief that sleeping with your head too elevated could cause nosebleeds, or worse, disturb the flow of your humors. Yes, the body's four sacred juices: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These little fluids allegedly governed your personality, your mood, and yes, even your sleep posture. Too much elevation might invite excess phlegm. Not enough? Your blood might rush to your head and produce dangerous dreams. Or gas. Or both. You adjust again, finally settling on your back, head barely cushioned by what feels like a stack of damp laundry. There's no ergonomic support, no memory foam, no cool side of the pillow luxury. Just lumps. Medieval lumps. But hey, at least no one's accusing your pillow of being French. That's a thing, too. In the 14th century, French fashions, particularly among pillows and bedding, were considered decadent and morally suspect in some English circles. Why would you copy the enemy's bedtime customs when you could just sleep upright in a wooden chair like a proper English miser? Still, you wouldn't say no to a bit of stolen comfort. Sometimes, folks would sneak in herbs, lavender, sage, thyme, into their pillow sacks, not just for the smell, but for supposed sleep-aiding properties. In your case, someone may have tossed in a sprig of rosemary. Or was that rat nesting material? Too late to tell. Somewhere across the room, someone coughs. A wet, rattling sound. Tuberculosis? Just a cold? Hard to know. You're not a doctor. You're a medieval sleeper with neck pain and questionable sleep hygiene. In richer households, the beds were raised, sometimes by several feet, and layered with feather mattresses, bolsters, sheets, and, still more lumps. But even then, comfort was never guaranteed. Even in a castle, you'd find yourself rotating pillows. This one's too flat. That one smells funny. The other one has a suspicious stain that might be from wine. Or might be from something worse. You consider flipping your makeshift pillow over. Maybe the other side has less mildew. Maybe the wood grain won't press into your ear quite as hard. You turn it, lay your head down, and immediately regret it. It's colder, somehow wetter, possibly cursed. Still, the effort is almost endearing. You fall into a half-sleep imagining pillow inventions that wouldn't exist for centuries, adjustable height, hypoallergenic stuffing, cooling gel layers. You dream of softness, and your head responds by rolling off its perch and thunking gently onto the bare floor. Somehow, it's better. A breeze whistles through a crack in the wall. Your dog stirs at your feet. The sack under your head settles with a crunch. Not ideal, not soft, but in this century, it's about as good as it gets. And hey, no one's judged you for having a pillow yet, so maybe you're doing alright. You barely manage a shallow doze before the weight beside you shifts. Someone's elbow grazes your ribs. A foot, not yours, twitches in your direction. You grunt, adjusting in the darkness, reminding yourself, yes, this is normal. This is shared sleeping, medieval style. Beds aren't private spaces here. They're communal zones of necessity. A bit like public transport, but horizontal and with more coughing. In most medieval homes, especially those of commoners, beds are shared, not just by couples or families, but often by complete strangers, travelers, apprentices, extended relatives who dropped in just for the feast day and never left. There's little in the way of personal space. If you were hoping to sleep starfish style, think again. The hearth's warmth is for everyone, and so is the bed. You shift again, careful not to dislodge the elderly aunt pressed against your back. She snores like a distressed bellows and talks in her sleep about goat milk prices. It's almost comforting, if you squint your brain the right way. This isn't unusual. Sleeping with strangers, known as bedding in, is common practice, both out of necessity and social custom. Inns, for instance, often rent beds per person, not per room, so you might stumble into a shared cot with a merchant from York, a toothless minstrel, and a chatty tanner who smells faintly of dead cows. Sounds charming, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether people in such arrangements actually slept much, or simply lay still, waiting for dawn and trying not to touch anyone too obviously. The theory of thermal cooperation helps explain the practice. When walls leak cold air and blankets are scarce, bodies become furnaces. You're not cuddling because you like them, you're doing it to survive. And probably because your feet are like icy little sausages. But even among the upper classes, privacy is rare. You might have a larger bed, sure, a fancier canopy, silk sheets, even, but also, valets, maids, and personal attendants waiting in the corners, dozing in chairs, or lying right at the foot of your bed in case you needed a 2 a.m. goblet refill or someone to check for ghosts. Yes, really, ghosts were part of the conversation. Many believed night was a thin time, a liminal veil when spirits crossed into the world of the living. Having someone nearby wasn't just helpful in case of nightmares, it might actually scare the nightmares off. Still, you try to carve out your square of the mattress. Someone turns. The mattress sighs under the weight. It's a rope bed design, essentially a wooden frame strung with crisscrossing ropes beneath a straw-stuffed bag. The ropes sag a bit, which explains why medieval folks often slept on diagonals or in tightly packed wedges to stay on the firmest part. A joke floats into your tired thoughts: good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bedbugs bite. That phrase? It may have originated with those rope beds. You had to tighten the ropes regularly or risk rolling into the middle like a human taco. And yes, bedbugs were absolutely biting. You feel your neighbor's breath. It's warm. It's sour. It smells like onions and ale and something vaguely herbal. Probably that homebrew cough remedy made of garlic and sheep's bile. Charming. You remind yourself, again, that personal space is a fantasy. In cities, space was expensive. In rural villages, homes were small, families large, and the idea of separate bedrooms? Almost non-existent. Even married couples weren't guaranteed alone time. Children slept in the same bed. So did cousins. So did wandering priests. If they dropped by for a meal and got snowed in, hospitality required sharing. So did basic survival. That's not to say bed sharing lacked rules. The unspoken codes were many: no rolling, no touching, no sudden noises, and definitely no snoring contests. Those were already won by Uncle Osric. Thank you very much. You stare into the dark. Across the room, someone shifts in another bed. A floorboard creaks. A soft plop, chamber pot incident. Probably. You don't want to think about it. And just when you think sleep might return, your neighbor begins to mutter. Dream talk. Something about chickens and a bucket and possibly a cursed mirror. You nod politely to the darkness. You've heard weirder. There are a few exceptions, of course. Monks and nuns often slept separately. In silence, each in their own cot or cell, though not always. Some slept in large dormitories, lined up in rows like sleepy sardines, regulated by strict bells and cold drafts. Silence wasn't optional, neither was celibacy, which made things even more awkward when someone murmured sweet nothings in their dreams. In one infamous account, a monk was expelled for emitting devilish groans in his sleep. Was it possession? Repressed dreams? Historians still debate the details. Either way, it makes your snoring aunt seem positively angelic. Eventually, your brain stops fussing. You begin to accept the heat of the bodies around you, the weight of the night, the endless background hum of medieval life, even at rest. Never really quiet. You take a deep breath and burrow closer to your patch of space. Such as it is, you forget, for now, the indignity of elbow brushes and midnight mutterings. You forget that tomorrow, you'll be woken not by an alarm, but by roosters, footsteps, and someone tripping over the dog. Tonight, you just sleep, shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath, with people who may not know your name, but know the warmth you bring, which, in this time, is enough. Your eyes crack open, not because of sunlight, there is none yet, not because someone jostled you, though that's likely happened, but because your body, strangely and precisely, has decided it's time. Welcome to the first sleep. Yes, first sleep, because in medieval Europe, nighttime wasn't one long slumber. It was two separate acts, with an intermission. This is the segmented sleep model. You sleep for several hours, wake up for 1 or 2, and then go back down for your second sleep. Sounds inefficient? Maybe. But back then, it was the norm. And in this chilly room full of shared breathing and shifting bodies, it kind of makes sense. You sit up slowly. The straw rustles. Someone snores on. Oblivious. A dull orange glow from the hearth smolders in the center of the house, casting soft shadows on the rafters. It's quiet, but not dead quiet. Someone coughs. A chicken rustles in its coop by the wall. A neighbor mutters, half dreaming. What do you do during this midnight gap? You might pray. A lot of people do. You might stoke the fire. Or tend to a child. Or, let's be honest, relieve yourself with a slosh into the chamber pot. Romantic, isn't it? You stretch, yawn, and lie back, staring at the beams above. This is the liminal hour, neither day nor night. In cities, the watchmen patrol. In villages, the dogs bark at shadows. In castles, torches flicker as sleepy guards pretend not to doze in corners. For many, this quiet gap is an opportunity. Historical records describe people rising to tend small tasks, mending clothes, checking animals, or, more cheekily, getting frisky. One 15th century medical manual even recommends the time between sleeps as ideal for conception. Apparently, it was when your body's humors were most balanced, because nothing says romance like optimal phlegm levels. Historians still argue why segmented sleep disappeared. Was it gaslighting? Coffee? The Industrial Revolution? Probably all three. But in your bed tonight, it just feels normal. You're awake, but not fully. Rested, but not done. Some scholars believe this break in sleep allowed people to process dreams. People took their dreams very seriously. A particularly vivid one might be shared at breakfast, dissected for omens, or offered to the local priest for interpretation. Did you dream of a red dog? Could be fire, or passion, or demonic possession. Depends on the breed. Probably. You sigh and rub your eyes. Your muscles are still sore. Your stomach empty. You won't eat until daylight. But for now, your mind wanders. Some folks wrote letters during this time, if they were literate and had candlelight to spare. Others might sneak out to a lover's window. You're just trying to ignore the fact that someone has clearly stolen your blanket corner again. Segmented sleep wasn't just physiological, it was cultural. The space between sleeps was liminal. Sure, but also charged. Ghost stories circulated about this hour. It was said witches preferred it. So did thieves. Even the word midnight has its ominous weight, doesn't it? You hear something outside, a thud, then another. The dog lifts its head but doesn't bark. You lie still. Could be the night watchman making rounds, clanging his stick, reminding the town it's still being watched. Or it could be someone testing windows. There's no real security system here. Just doors barred with wood, maybe iron, and the hope that no one's desperate enough to come inside for warmth. Or worse, for your bread stash. Still, you don't panic. You're used to this life. To being alert, even in sleep. Your senses keep one eye half open. It's how your ancestors survived. A noise at midnight isn't panic, it's information. Eventually, the glow of the hearth dims further. Your breathing slows. You lie back down, trying to reclaim your spot. Someone has shifted. There's less room than before. Your head lands awkwardly on the pillow sack. Still damp from earlier. The dog sighs. And then, it returns. Second sleep. You feel it creeping in slowly. Like mist into the forest. The tension melts from your fingers. Your jaw unclenches. Your back finally gives up trying to fight the rope-sagging mattress. Second sleep is said to be deeper. More peaceful. In many records, it's when dreams became vivid. When the mind entered its truest rest. First sleep was recovery. Second was restoration. You're not just resting now. You're healing. But not everyone gets to enjoy it. Night guards must stay awake. Servants in large houses may rise early to prep bread or stir the kitchen fires. Mothers rock colicky babies through the lull. And in monasteries, monks may be called to matins. A nocturnal prayer service, up at 2 a.m. to chant psalms in Latin? Sounds restful. And yet, there's something oddly lovely about it all. 2 sleeps, divided by mystery. A rhythm we've forgotten but may still carry deep in our DNA. You're already drifting again. The shadows grow softer. The snoring grows fainter. Even the dog has stilled. Outside, the wind brushes softly against the shutters. The second sleep begins. Word count 1.060. Awaiting, continue. Ban da noi. Continue. Chat GPT da noi. Section 5. You're somewhere between the edges of sleep and waking now. Drifting through the kind of dream that feels half real. Half mad. A field of frogs chanting in Latin. A talking door. A night offering you cheese made of moonlight. Yeah, it's getting weird. But in medieval times, that's par for the course. Dreams weren't just random brain static. They were important, sometimes divine, sometimes demonic, and always meaningful. What you dreamed at night could shape how you behaved during the day. You turn over as your mind serves up another strange image. A woman with the face of a cat handing you a candle made of bone. You don't question it. It's dream logic. The most vivid dreams, people believed, came during second sleep. This was the spiritual shift, the hour when your soul, temporarily untethered, could drift into other realms. And yes, they thought your soul was leaving your body while you slept. Like a spiritual traveler popping out for a late-night metaphysical jog. Many people recorded their dreams, or had them interpreted by clergy or local wise women. Dream books were popular among the literate, especially those based on classical or biblical symbolism. Dream of falling? That could mean social ruin. Dream of flying? Pride. Dream of being chased by geese? Definitely heresy. Or lunch envy. Or both. But not all dreams were interpreted so gently. You turn again, uneasily this time, because the line between dreaming and visitation was dangerously thin. If you had a terrifying dream, especially one featuring fire, snakes, or seductive demons, people might say you were being tested, or punished, or even possessed. You twitch as your dream darkens. Something's watching you from a hill made of teeth. You're vaguely aware of your surroundings now, of the room, the scratch of straw, the body heat beside you, but the dream won't let go. In the medieval mindset, these nightmares had weight. A demon in your dream could be a sign of sin. Or it might be a succubus, a female demon that visited men in sleep to tempt them into carnal sins. The male version, the incubus, did the same to women. If you woke up sweating and breathless, you might very well be accused of nocturnal temptation, which was awkward during breakfast. To protect yourself, people slept with holy relics, saints' bones, pieces of the true cross, or if you couldn't afford that, a scrap of blessed linen or a crucifix under the bed. Some stuffed little handwritten prayers into tiny cloth amulets and tied them around their neck or wrist. Just enough divine insurance in case something unholy decided to drop by after midnight. Historians still debate whether most people really believed in these nighttime encounters or if it was more a way of explaining bad sleep, wet dreams, or the general chaos of the subconscious. But regardless, The anxiety was real. People took sleep seriously, especially when dreams turned dark. You roll onto your back, half awake again, and stare into the darkness. You feel a pressure, not physical. Not quite, just a presence. The fire's glow is nearly gone, leaving only a sliver of amber beneath the hearth's ash. Your dream lingers. The cat-faced woman still hovers behind your eyes. Some might have gone to confession after such dreams. Others to the village healer, who might burn herbs like mugwort, wormwood, or even henbane near your bed to ward off dream spirits. The idea was to cleanse the space between waking and sleeping, like scrubbing down your brain before bedtime. But that had its risks. Too much of the wrong herb and your dreams didn't just get strange, they got hallucinatory. Some monks noted visions during sleep that, frankly, sound more like accidental drug trips. One journal mentions riding a flying wheel into a garden of talking birds who spoke in riddles about the apocalypse. That could be divine, or it could be what happens when you accidentally inhale moldy incense. And then there were dreams that brought comfort. Saints appearing in the night, offering advice or blessings. A dead loved one smiling silently. A flash of light that brought peace rather than panic. People cherished those dreams, passed them down, turned them into village lore. They were seen as gifts. Hope wrapped in shadow. You shift again. Your dream has changed. The field is gone. Now you're in a quiet cloister, where moonlight spills through arched windows. A monk is humming. He turns, and he has your face. You blink. He smiles. Then he dissolves into mist. You wake. Your heart thumps gently. The dream stays with you, not frightening, just strange. You stare into the dark and wonder what it meant. You know that, in this world, someone would listen. Someone would help you piece it apart. Like pulling threads from wool. Because dreams mattered. Even if it was just your brain trying to make sense of rotten mutton and too much onion stew. Eventually, you close your eyes again. Let the dream recede like the tide. The fear settles. The air in the room feels lighter now. Somehow, you reach a hand to your chest and trace a tiny wooden cross you tied on before bed. It's worn smooth from nights like this. A tiny, silent shield against whatever strangeness your brain serves up next. You whisper a quiet prayer, just in case, and drift back down. You stir again, not because of a dream this time, but because something in the room smells peculiar. Not immediately offensive, just an invisible bouquet of ancient cheese, feet, damp wool, smoke, and maybe a hint of cabbage. It's hard to describe medieval bedroom air. Thick, smoky, stale, slightly crunchy, if that's possible, with no chimneys in most common homes. Smoke from the central hearth just hangs in the rafters, swirling and sinking depending on how friendly the wind feels that night. And because candles are made of animal fat, every flickering flame adds the warm aroma of scorched beef tallow to the mix. You try not to breathe too deeply. You shift your leg and feel a soft clang. That's the chamber pot. Yes, it's exactly where you hoped it wasn't, right beside the bed. Just waiting to ruin your night with one misjudged toe tap. Still, it beats stumbling outside at 3 a.m. into the mud, with your only light source being a flickering torch and the glowing eyes of things that live in barns. Medieval homes didn't separate sleeping from living. The bedroom was the house. One space did it all: cooking, eating, praying, sleeping, occasionally dying. Everything happened in the same single room layout. So naturally, the nighttime atmosphere was layered. You exhale and immediately regret it. Someone nearby just rolled over, pulling their blanket aside and releasing a warm gust of their day's digestion. You pretend it didn't happen. They pretend it didn't happen. That's the agreement. Historians still argue how people coped with the sheer olfactory assault of nightly life. Some say they simply didn't notice, having acclimated over time. Others argue that herbs were key, bundles of sage or lavender hanging from rafters, or rushes strewn across the floor that released sharp, lemony scents when stepped on. You glance across the room in the darkness. A sprig of something dry dangles near the hearth. Maybe rosemary. Maybe just old straw pretending to be rosemary. Either way, it's lost the battle. And then, the sounds begin. Not loud ones, but unmistakable. The creak of an old beam as someone shifts. A wet cough, buried under blankets. A low groan as someone dreams about tax collectors or devil-possessed sheep. The dog snores, surprisingly melodically. You'd compliment it if you weren't so tired. The soundscape of a medieval night isn't silent. It's alive with whispers, rustles, breath. Rats scurry in the thatch above you, launching their nightly Olympics. Chickens murmur in their sleep. Somewhere outside, an owl hoots in a rhythm that's starting to sound sarcastic. But what gets you most is the damp. That creeping, inescapable moisture that settles into your bedding. Your clothes, your soul. Windows, if they exist, are tiny slits or animal skin coverings. Ventilation is a myth. The walls sweat, so do you. And so does everyone else. You flip your blanket, seeking a dry corner. There isn't one. You flip your pillow sack. Bad idea. It's absorbed more humidity than a sponge in a fog bank. You just sigh and accept it. Moisture is a roommate now. In noble houses, things aren't much better. Sure, they've got tapestries and velvet hangings. But all that fabric traps air like a stale sandwich. Plus, those grand 4-poster beds? Curtains closed all around to hold in heat? They also hold in everything else. Including that time the dog was sick on the furs. You shuffle closer to the fire's fading warmth. Not too close, you've heard stories. One woman rolled too far and woke up with her hair aflame. Another dozed near the hearth and caught the hem of her shift alight. It's a whole genre of bedtime horror, medieval fire hazards. You hear someone shifting toward the chamber pot. You pretend not to notice. Privacy's a fantasy here. You keep your eyes closed. The trick is to remain perfectly still. Like a medieval log of emotional detachment. Eventually, they'll finish and settle again. And the splashing echo will fade into memory. Even nobles used close stools and chamber pots. Castle life meant dragging your porcelain privilege to a corner of the room. Doing your business behind a curtain, if lucky. And hoping no one burst in with late-night gossip. Or worse, a message from court. You sigh again, deep and slow, trying not to inhale too much. Your face itches, probably from the straw mites. You scratch lazily, something crunches. You decide not to investigate. Some people wore bedclothes soaked in vinegar, believing it would ward off illness. Others burned herbs, or placed carved charms near their beds to purify the air. Did it work? Maybe, maybe not. The Black Death still came anyway. But hey, at least it smelled like you were trying. You shift positions one last time. Your arm flops onto a warm patch of blanket, probably shared with your cousin or a neighbor or the dog. You're no longer sure where one person ends and another begins. It's fine. The smell of humanity wraps around you like a wool-lined memory of onions. Old shoes. And sleep. Eventually. It doesn't matter. Your nose stops fighting. Your ears quiet. The noises become lullabies. The smells become background. And in this rich, ripe haze of straw, smoke, sweat, and shared breath, you fall asleep again. You're asleep, deeply, blissfully so, until something yanks you back. It's not noise this time. Not snoring. Not rats. It's you. Or rather, what you've just done in your sleep. Your arm is raised. Your eyes are open, but you're not awake. You're halfway up, muttering something under your breath. Something in Latin? You never learned Latin. But now, here you are, babbling about the beast and the flame. Eyes vacant, expression blank. Welcome to the wonderful world of medieval sleepwalking. Or as they sometimes called it, nocturnal demonic influence. You flop back down with a grunt and, moments later, stir awake for real. Confused, slightly sweaty. The straw crackles beneath you. Someone across the room is whispering. Possibly about you. Because what you just did wasn't just strange. It might have been a sign of sin, or possession, or both. In the medieval mind, odd nighttime behavior often had spiritual causes. Sleepwalking, groaning, strange motions. These weren't dismissed as random. They were taken very, very seriously. You might just be tired. Or you might be under attack from within. Some physicians of the day blamed humoral imbalances. Too much black bile, for instance, was thought to make people sluggish, melancholic, and, when left unchecked, vulnerable to midnight wanderings. Others thought sleepwalkers were the result of bad air in the home or lunar misalignment. But most commonly, the blame fell on demons. Historians still debate whether cases of sleepwalking led to formal accusations of possession or witchcraft. Some records are vague, others are terrifyingly specific. Like the baker's daughter who woke up in a hayloft 20 miles away. Or the farmer who walked as if seeing visions and spoke in languages he never learned. These things didn't lead to slumber parties, they led to exorcisms. You lie still, trying to remember what you said. Was it the beast with 7 tails? That's not great. You reach down and touch the cloth amulet at your chest. The one your aunt made from threads blessed by Father Arno. Supposed to ward off evil dreams. Not doing great at its job. Apparently. Of course, not every midnight incident was blamed on hellfire. Some believed your soul was traveling, seeking answers from the heavens. It was said certain saints could leave their bodies while sleeping and witness divine visions. Problem is, you're no saint, and your visions mostly involve screaming goats. Still, people tried everything to avoid these nighttime dramas. Prayers before bed were essential. Not just, "Now I lay me down to sleep," but long, rambling invocations of saints, angels, and Mary herself. Some even drew protective symbols on the bedposts in chalk, tiny crosses, circles, or the occasional sword carved with a kitchen knife. Others turned to folk remedies. A sprig of St. John's wort tucked under the mattress. Mugwort tea before bed, though that might cause more dreams. Not fewer. One recipe advised smearing a paste of honey and thyme on the forehead, though that likely just attracted ants. You close your eyes again, willing yourself to sleep, but now your brain is humming. What if you do it again? What if you rise in the middle of the night, wander outside barefoot, muttering curses in your sleep, and someone sees? Worse yet, what if you sin in your sleep? Because yes, even dreaming about lustful acts could land you in confession. The medieval church had strong opinions about what the subconscious was up to. Night emissions? Seen as spiritual weakness. Dreams of temptation? Evidence of impurity. Some priests even prescribed days of fasting or cold baths after a particularly vivid dream. There's a record of one monk who dreamt of kissing a nun and spent the next week sleeping on stone in the cloister to cleanse his thoughts. Another claimed he was seduced by Satan disguised as a beautiful woman in red, and immediately shaved his head, vowing silence. A dramatic response, but very on brand. You shift under your blanket. Your mind races. Did you do anything you'll have to explain to the priest tomorrow? Probably not, but in this world, you never really know. You once heard of a man who confessed to stealing fruit in a dream. The priest forgave him, but made him donate the equivalent value to the church. Just to be sure. You sigh. The dog stirs at your feet. The room is quiet again. Someone mumbles across the room, more dream talk. Soft and slurred. You try not to listen, but catch the word, fire. Again, popular theme tonight. Maybe the dreams will settle now. Maybe you'll sleep still, unhaunted. Maybe your mind won't go wandering without you. And if it does, well, you'll have your explanation ready. You were tired. You were overworked. The moon was high. The soup was strange. Or maybe, you were visited. In a world where medicine is guesswork and science is mostly alchemy. That's as good an answer as any. You tug the blanket tighter. Pull the amulet close. Whisper a quiet, lopsided prayer. And try to stay put. You wake to the distinct sound of someone whispering the word, spoons, in their sleep. Not just once. Over and over. Spoons, spoons, spoons. You lie there for a moment. Blanket pulled up to your chin. Watching the silhouette of the speaker, your cousin. Probably, rocks slightly back and forth in the half-light. You make a mental note to ask her about it. Or not. Because tonight, you're royalty. Let's pretend, just for a bit, that you've been upgraded. No more straw. No more elbowy relatives or chamber pots within tripping range. No, you are in a noble chamber now. Raised above the smoky din of the peasants. Behind stone walls and velvet drapery. With guards posted at the doors and embroidered slippers waiting by the fire. And yet, it's not much better. You shift in your absurdly tall bed. It's practically a staircase, raised high off the ground to escape the cold drafts and rodents. The royal bed is a 4-poster fortress of feather-stuffed mattresses, bolsters, and more layers than a lasagna. Soft? Yes. Comfortable? Not quite. It's so thick you feel like you're sleeping on a fat, confused sheet. The bed is curtained on all sides. Like a privacy box for the important and perpetually paranoid. You pull the drapes slightly, peeking into the room. Shadows dance on the carved stone walls, tapestries rustle gently. Somewhere near the door, your personal servant, half asleep, is pretending not to listen to you breathe. Because even royalty don't sleep alone. In noble homes, personal attendants sleep nearby at all times. sometimes at the foot of your bed, sometimes on a cot across the room, sometimes just standing, leaning against a wall like polite furniture. Their job? Watch, listen, be ready, in case you stir, or shout, or require warm wine at 3 a.m. because your dream involved geese and now you're unsettled. Historians still argue how much privacy medieval nobles actually had. Royal chambers were often social spaces, full of movement, gossip, and obligation. Visitors might drop in with urgent matters at any hour. Courtiers might be waiting just outside. Privacy, like warm baths, was a suggestion, not a guarantee. You stretch out an arm and feel the polished wood of your ornate bed frame. It's carved with religious symbols, lions, and possibly your own smug face. Beds were statements back then, not just of wealth, but of power. Owning a massive, canopied bed was like shouting, "I am important enough to sleep dramatically." But along with the comfort came the danger. Nobles were extremely concerned with being murdered in their sleep. That's not paranoia, it's history. Kings were smothered, stabbed, or, in one case, sweated to death by being locked in a hot chamber overnight. So beds weren't just comfy nests. They were tactical zones. That's why your bedchamber is bolted. That's why you sleep with a dagger under your pillow. That's why your chamberlain checks the windows before dousing the candles, just in case. And then there's the politics. Royal beds weren't always just for sleeping. They were also used for audiences. Yes, you read that right. People would come into the royal chamber, kneel by your bed, and discuss affairs of state while you lounged dramatically under 6 layers of embroidered fur. Imagine managing tax reform while half buried in a pillow fort. That's your life now. Still, the bedding itself is impressive. The mattress is filled with goose feathers. The pillows, multiple, are of varying firmness. The sheets are linen, probably imported. The quilt is so heavily embroidered it could legally qualify as armor. And yet, something itches. Something always itches. Maybe the wool shift you're wearing. Maybe the velvet head covering, tied too tight. Maybe it's just the knowledge that you're expected to produce an heir and there's a whole staff of whispering nobility counting your sleep schedule. You turn. You adjust your nightcap. You consider ringing the small bell beside the bed for someone to bring a hot stone to warm your feet. But you don't. You're not that kind of noble. Yet, outside, the castle is quiet, but not still. Guards murmur below. The wind howls between the towers. A mouse nibbles near the tapestries, risking a swift demise from the chamber cat. You close your eyes again. Try to forget the pressure, the watchful eyes, the looming duty. Just sleep. But it's hard to relax when you know someone is always just outside the curtain, waiting to serve or eavesdrop. Because in this chamber, luxury is lined with eyes. And the bed, though soft, never quite lets you rest. You wake to cold toes and the distant toll of a bell. Not your usual rude awakening by elbow or snore, but the deep, echoing clang of a monastery's iron tongue. Time is slipping forward again. And the world is waking. Slowly, reluctantly. But you're somewhere else this morning. You're not in a peasant's straw pile or a noble's quilted fortress. You're in a monastery now, stone walls, echoing halls, the faint scent of candle wax and discipline in the air. And your bed? Well, that's generous. You lie on a narrow plank bed. No mattress, no pillow, no drapery, just a stiff wooden frame, a scratchy wool blanket, and the damp breath of winter hugging your spine. The room is cold. Always cold, even in summer. Monasteries don't do cozy, they do penance. You're wearing the same robe you wore yesterday, and the day before. It's not because you're lazy, it's because you've taken vows of poverty and humility. Cleanliness is godly, but too much comfort? That's suspicious. That's prideful. That's one step away from heresy. Friend, you stretch stiffly and sit up. There's no drowsy linger. There's no curling under the covers. There is only the rule of Saint Benedict, ora et labora. Pray and work, and sleep, only as much as you absolutely must. In many monastic orders, especially stricter ones, monks and nuns slept only a few hours at a time. The day and night was divided into chunks of prayer. One at midnight, one at dawn, others spaced throughout the day like spiritual alarm clocks. You rise in the dark, chant in Latin, bow and kneel and recite, then return to bed. Maybe, to grab another sliver of rest. Historians still argue whether this sleep-deprived cycle led to enlightenment or just a lot of head-bobbing monks dozing mid-psalm. But it was all in service to God. To suffer discomfort in sleep was to train the soul. You pull your blanket tighter, but your feet refuse to warm up. That's the thing about stone floors, they suck the heat out of your bones. And forget insulation. The wind sneaks through the tiniest cracks, wraps around your ankles like judgment. The bed doesn't creak, too stiff for that. But your knees do. In some orders, monks slept sitting up in chairs, fully dressed, ready to rise at the toll of the bell. They believed lying fully horizontal encouraged indulgence, sloth, even lust. Better to doze upright, slightly miserable, but spiritually alert. You're not quite at that level. Yet, still, you know the discomfort is intentional. It keeps you humble, keeps you focused. In this world, luxury is the enemy of salvation. But it wasn't all strict silence and stiff planks. Some monks did bend the rules. A little straw here, an extra blanket there. One abbot in the 13th century even allowed his monks small pillows during the plague years, reasoning that a little comfort might prevent full rebellion. Radical. Your thoughts drift to nights, the other extreme of holy exhaustion. A knight might be roused from a tent in the middle of the night, thrown into chainmail, and expected to ride into a skirmish after barely 2 hours of rest. Comfort? That's for the French. Sleeping in armor wasn't common, but it did happen, especially during times of siege or imminent battle. You try to imagine it, iron plates digging into your ribs, helmet pressing into your temple, chainmail pinching in places best left unpinched. You'd sweat, chafe, and probably wake up with bruises you don't remember earning. But to sleep without armor? That was dangerous too. Many a soldier met their end trying to tug on a breastplate in the dark while arrows zipped through the canvas. You roll onto your side. The wood is no softer that way. You pull your robe closer and try not to shiver. The bell tolls again, matins. Or maybe lauds. The names blur together when you haven't slept more than 3 hours straight in a week. You consider skipping it, just this once. But then you remember Brother Thomas, who tried that last winter. He fell asleep through the midnight prayer, and by dawn his blanket had been replaced with snow. The lesson? God sees all, and your fellow monks are petty. Somewhere nearby, footsteps echo softly, sandals on stone, a candle flickers, the hush of breath as someone tiptoes past your cell. Eyes downcast, you breathe out, slowly, your breath mists in the air. It's beautiful, in a bleak sort of way. And somehow, despite the cold, despite the aches, despite the constant intrusion of bells and rules, you feel calm. The simplicity is its own comfort. No one is snoring beside you. No one is muttering about spoons or moaning about goats. Just you, your blanket, and the knowledge that you'll rise, pray, work, and then, eventually, rest again. For now, you lie back, let the stiffness settle into your bones. Let the silence wrap around you. No dreams, no demons, just the soft rhythm of breath, the distant toll of another bell, and the feeling, just for a moment, that your stillness might count as praise. You jolt awake with an itch. Not a metaphorical one, a very real, very insistent, very medieval itch. You scratch your arm, then your scalp, then the side of your thigh, through 3 layers of wool. Because your modesty is clinging on by a thread. But no matter how much you scratch, it's not going away. It never does. Because tonight, as with most nights, you are not alone. You are hosting a gala of guests you never invited, fleas, lice, and possibly ticks. They love your bed, your warmth, your medieval musk, and they're not shy. You groan and sit up slightly, peering at the dark outline of your bedclothes. It's not like you can see them, but oh, you can feel them. They're having a feast. Everyone's got parasites. It's just a fact. Personal hygiene is, let's say, aspirational. You might bathe once a week, if you're fancy. If you're average, you might be using the dust and rub technique, which involves a dry cloth, some herbs, and a lot of hope. Hair washing? Infrequent. Lice combing? More common, but more is pest control than personal care. Historians still argue whether medieval folks were truly filthy or just doing the best they could with bad plumbing and worse science. What's agreed upon is that scratching was an ever-present bedtime ritual. You roll to your side and yank a small wooden comb from under your pillow. Yes, you sleep with it, like a 14th century teddy bear. It's got 2 rows of teeth, one wide, one fine. The fine ones are for the lice. You start working it through your hair. Slowly, gently, hoping to avoid the awful, satisfying snap of something popping loose. On good nights, you win the battle. On bad nights, you just relocate them to your collar or your eyebrows. The dog sighs from the foot of the bed. It's also scratching, sympathetic. Really, bedding is, by nature, infested. Straw mattresses aren't cleaned so much as replaced, maybe once or twice a year. During major religious festivals or if the smell becomes unbearable. Until then, it's layer upon layer of old hair, shed skin, flea eggs, and mystery crumbs. A cozy buffet. You remember hearing that garlic worn around the neck can ward off bed bugs. You've tried it. All it does is make you hungry in your sleep and slightly unpopular in the morning. Vinegar rub-downs are another classic remedy. So is bathing with ashes and lye soap, though that tends to replace lice with blisters. Some noble households kept cats in the bedroom, not for companionship, but for pest control. The idea was that if a mouse or flea needed a place to land, it might choose the cat first. Generous thinking. And also, completely unreliable. You scratch your arm again. A little harder this time. Someone across the room stirs and does the same. It's a chorus. A nightly rhythm of tiny itches and sleepy slaps. You wonder if royalty had it better. Probably not. A feather mattress doesn't scare a determined louse. Even queens were known to keep lice combs on their dressing tables. One royal physician recommended powdered mint and rose petals sprinkled in the bed linens. Which sounds lovely, until the petals rot. You glance toward the hearth. A pot of water sits near the edge, still warm. Some families boil their clothes to kill off the lice. Some just hang them outside and hope the frost finishes the job. You tried freezing your under tunic once. It worked, until it thawed in your lap. The irony, of course, is that people feared the wrong things. They feared fresh air, feared water, sometimes, feared that bathing too often would weaken the body. But no one feared sleeping in filth. That was just life. You pull your blanket tighter, scratching gently at your ankle with one toe. It's an art, really. Scratch without waking your bedmate. Scratch without drawing blood. Scratch just enough to soothe the itch, but not enough to start an argument with whatever parasite is now your close companion. You wonder if they name you. Do the fleas gather and tell tales of the one who tosses? Do they rate sleeping spots by how much they get jostled? You chuckle softly in the dark. You're losing it, but you're also exhausted. Eventually, the itching becomes background noise. A part of you, like the snoring and the smell in the straw. You fall back into that half-sleep. Your body buzzing faintly with life, yours and otherwise. It's not pleasant, but it's home. You're nearly asleep when the snoring starts. Not the polite kind, like a distant bear purring. No, this is the full medieval symphony, a nasal chainsaw solo erupting from somewhere to your left, followed immediately by the guttural bass line of someone else's snore, deep, irregular, and suspiciously wet. You lie there, eyes open, staring into the void, listening. It is astonishing. You weren't even sure one person could make that kind of sound, let alone two. And yet, here you are, trapped in a bed, or on a shared sleeping platform, flanked by what sounds like 2 oxen battling for dominance in the nasal passageways of hell. You consider nudging someone, just a gentle shove, but this is a dangerous game. You wake the snorer. They might just talk, or worse, confess. Because yes, sleep talking was a real medieval concern. Not just a curiosity, a liability. You hear it now, soft murmuring. Someone's talking in their sleep again. At first, it's just mumbles. Then a clear phrase. It wasn't my goat. A pause. Then, tell Father Renaud I found the sausage. You blink slowly, processing that. Sleep talking wasn't considered innocent babble back then. It was often seen as the subconscious revealing truths. Or sins. If someone murmured about theft, lust, betrayal, even in a dream, it could be taken seriously. You might find yourself questioned by family, neighbors, or clergy. Were you really at the Millhouse last Tuesday night, Marcus? You mentioned fire. What fire? What goat? Historians still argue how often these sleep confessions led to formal punishments. But there are records of people being accused, and even punished, for things they were overheard saying in their sleep. And you're suddenly very aware of your own nighttime ramblings. You try to recall. Have you ever said something in your sleep? Last week, you woke yourself up with the word, apricots. Not incriminating, but weird. You're not even sure what an apricot is. The murmuring continues. Another sleeper joins in, just whispering, no, 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 in a rhythm that starts to sound like a prayer. Or a warning. And then comes the moaning. Not the dramatic kind, just soft, haunted sighs. Someone's having a bad dream. Clearly. Maybe a vision. Maybe a memory. Or maybe just gas. Honestly, hard to tell in this place. In this age, a sound at night is always something. Rarely shrugged off. Always interpreted. If you scream in your sleep, someone might douse you with holy water. If you laugh, they might assume you're consorting with spirits. One recorded case from a 14th century town mentions a man whose sleep laughter was blamed on imps. Tiny, invisible, giggling demons. You roll onto your back and try to find peace in the chaos. The snoring shifts tempo. One stops, another picks up, like a baton pass in the worst symphony imaginable. There were medieval cures for snoring, of course. One involved tying a leather strap around the chest to keep the sleeper upright. Another required placing garlic beneath the pillow, because nothing encourages nasal clarity like strong herbal aggression. You even heard of one priest recommending fasting for 7 days to dry the throat. In short, medieval solutions were creative. Of course, some believed snoring wasn't a physical issue, but a spiritual one, a sign of gluttony, or laziness, or even possession, depending on volume. There's a whole genre of texts describing how restless spirits could settle on a sleeper's chest, causing gasps, groans, and heavy breathing. Sound familiar? You shift again. You're tired, but alert, listening to your bedmates snuffle and wheeze and murmur. It's strangely hypnotic, like a terrible lullaby sung by beasts. You start to drift off. And then, you snort. It escapes you. Loud, sudden, undeniable. You were on the edge of sleep and your own body betrayed you. Dead silence follows. For a moment, you wonder if you've broken the spell. But no, someone shifts. Someone coughs. The snoring resumes, mercifully, drowning your embarrassment in a sea of phlegm and gurgling breath. You smile, half delirious, half defeated. This is your world, your night, a chamber filled with groaning, mumbling, confession-prone bodies wrapped in straw and secrets. Eventually, the chorus fades into background noise. Your eyes close again, and this time, you let the noise carry you right into the arms of sleep. You wake to a noise that's distinctly not snoring. A creak, a thump, a whisper, followed by the unmistakable, rhythmic squeak of tightly pulled rope under strain. Oh no. You crack one eye open, staring into the dark. The sound is coming from across the room, or maybe the loft above. It's subtle at first, a few faint sighs. Then, unmistakably, the slow, awkward thud of movement against a wooden bed frame. Congratulations, you're now the unwilling audience to medieval intimacy. Medieval homes didn't come with much in the way of privacy. Bedrooms? Rare. Soundproof walls? Fantasy. Curtains? If you were lucky. Which means that romantic activity was not only audible, it was communal knowledge. You weren't supposed to talk about it. But everyone knew. Everyone heard. And rope beds? They had opinions. Most medieval beds were suspended with crisscrossed ropes tied to a wooden frame. They were clever, adjustable, and affordable, but they squeaked. Especially under stress. The phrase, sleep tight, comes from the need to tighten the ropes nightly to keep the mattress firm. But on nights like this, the ropes aren't the only things being tested. You roll over slowly, doing your best impression of an indifferent log, but it's impossible to unhear what's happening. Whispers, giggling, one clear, shush. They'll hear. Too late. In many medieval communities, especially in shared homes or one-room cottages, the lines between private and public blurred completely. Married couples shared spaces with their children, in-laws, even the occasional traveling guest. That didn't stop anything. People just got creative, quiet, quick, or boldly resigned to the fact that someone would overhear. You sigh. At least they're not arguing. That happened last week. A domestic spat over misplaced sheet turned into a shouting match mid-bed. Much harder to sleep through than this. And speaking of arguments, lust and love in the medieval world were complicated. The church preached restraint. Sex was only for procreation. Anything else, especially if it felt good, was suspect. Sinful, even. And yet, people still had desires, still fell in love, still snuck out during that mysterious gap between first and second sleep. Historians still debate how strictly church teachings were followed. Sermons warned against the fires of the flesh, but records show communities where people married quickly after pregnancies, or arranged quiet absolution after confessed indiscretions. Love found its way. Lust, too. You shift in your itchy blanket and feel the lumpy weight of reality. Romance in this time isn't roses and poetry, it's practical. A dowry here, a land deal there, a way to survive. You don't marry for passion. Usually. But maybe, just maybe, you fall into it later. Or despite the odds. Or maybe you just climb into the loft after the second sleep and try not to wake the chickens. The bed frame across the room gives a final groan of surrender. Silence returns. A long one. Then the faint rustle of shifting straw. A shared chuckle. The soft thump of someone adjusting the curtain. You breathe again. But now you're thinking. About rope beds. About awkward silences. About how love in this time often lived in the shadows, quiet. Fleeting. Never written down. Unless you were a noble, of course. Then your romances were everyone's business. Royal marriages were political alliances. Affairs were whispered behind gloved hands at feasts. Love letters were copied by scribes and read aloud in court for amusement or scandal. One famous knight wrote poems to a lady he never met, claiming her face visited his dreams and gave him nosebleeds. That was supposed to be romantic. Even saints weren't safe from the romance plague. Monks sometimes wrote about divine love, using language so intense it could double as bad love poetry. One 13th century mystic described God as a burning lover with arrows of longing. The church quietly suggested she take up embroidery instead. You glance at the ceiling beams. Somewhere up there, the couple is probably dozing off now. Spent, happy, slightly sweaty, in that medieval way. And despite everything, despite the lack of soap, the rope creaks, the moral lectures, you smile. Because love, however weird, still finds its way, even in the darkness, even with snoring neighbors and flea-ridden blankets and a cow sleeping 20 feet away. You roll over, and try not to think too hard about where you'll be sleeping after they forget to change the straw. You lie still, listening. The room has quieted, the ropes have stopped squeaking, the snores have mellowed, even the dog has finally surrendered to its dreams, twitching one leg every so often as if chasing phantom chickens. But you're wide awake, because now your thoughts are turning upward, literally. To the stars, to the moon, to the sky's opinion on your bedtime. You sigh and look toward the small, grimy window above. If you squint, you can make out a sliver of night sky, a few stars, a crescent moon, and you begin to wonder, should you be asleep right now? Because in this world, the heavens don't just twinkle, they govern. Astrology is everywhere, not the casual, newspaper horoscope kind, the deeply serious, university-trained, multi-volume charted kind. Kings consult astrologers before declaring war. Peasants look to the moon before planting beans. And when it comes to sleep, the stars have opinions. You've heard it all before. Don't sleep facing east during a waxing moon. It invites dreams of confusion. Avoid going to bed during a Mercury retrograde. It disrupts digestion and causes night terrors. And if Venus is in the wrong house, that might explain the bed squeaks from earlier. You smirk, then catch yourself. The sky is watching. Many medieval folks believed that your time of sleep, the direction you slept in, and even the day of the week could affect your dreams, your health, and your fate. An astrologer might tell you to sleep with your head facing north for clarity, or south to avoid wind in the brain. Yes, that was a thing. Historians still argue whether these practices were more cultural than celestial. But records show real people using moon phases to plan everything from sleep schedules to spiritual cleansing. The night was never just dark. It was a map, a clock, a warning, and you haven't even touched your amulets. You lift the edge of your tunic and check. Yep, still tied around your neck, a small leather pouch. Barely the size of a walnut. Inside, a bit of parchment with a Latin verse. Folded tight, a pinch of St. Cuthbert's soil. And maybe, if rumor is true, a fingernail from a very holy bishop. You try not to think about that part. These aren't accessories. Their defenses. Medieval people wore charms, herbs, stones, and handwritten prayers to guard their sleep. Against nightmares, against demons, against wandering souls and spirits who might try to sit on your chest and whisper things like, "Repent," or "Give me your stew." Common sleep amulets included poppy seeds, amber, and mistletoe. One 14th century manual swears by powdered sapphire mixed with wine. Expensive, and a choking hazard. Others slept with small iron keys, believing they'd lock out bad dreams. You recall your aunt once sewing a tiny sack of chamomile, lavender, and ashes into her nightgown. She claimed it made her dreams gentler. You remember her snoring like a dying walrus. So maybe it worked, maybe not, but it wasn't just objects. Timing mattered too. There were entire calendars of sleep safe nights and dangerous ones. Nights when the veil between worlds was thin, when witches wandered, when souls slipped loose. These weren't just stories, they were marked in almanacs. Studied, avoided. You glance out the window again. Is tonight a good night? You don't know, but you slept during a waxing moon, near garlic, with iron scissors under the bed and a prayer in your sock. You're probably covered. Probably. Still, it's hard not to feel the sky pressing down. The stars aren't soft companions here, they're judges. Witnesses. Cosmic accountants tallying your soul's behavior. You breathe slowly. Try to release the anxiety. Try to convince yourself that your amulet isn't too close to your armpit and therefore rendered null and void. Eventually, your heart slows. Your thoughts ease. The stars continue to glitter, impossibly far, impossibly ancient, and the sky, for now, holds its secrets. You close your eyes, let the amulet rest, and hope the stars, tonight, are kind. You stir again, slowly, reluctantly, as light begins to creep through the edges of the shutter. It's not much, just a smear of blue-gray at first, then a dull gold, dust-speckled and soft. Morning is arriving, not with alarm clocks or phone buzzes, but with birdsong, the clatter of hooves outside, and the deeply judgmental crow of a rooster who's way too invested in your sleep schedule. You blink up at the ceiling. The beams are still there. The straw still pokes. The air smells faintly of soot, wool, and onions left too close to the hearth. But something's shifted. You survived the night, not dramatically, not triumphantly, but thoroughly. You sit up. Your bones complain. Your back sounds like a small percussion ensemble. Your blanket falls into your lap, trailing flecks of straw and, quite possibly, one of last night's flea guests. You brush it off with the weariness of someone who knows it'll be back by nightfall. Your feet hit the floor, cold, uneven, stone or packed dirt depending on your station in life, and you stretch your arms. A satisfying crack echoes in your shoulder. Someone in the room groans in sympathy. You're not the only one awake. Others are stirring, too. Some mumble morning prayers. Some yawn so loudly you worry they'll dislocate something. The dog flops dramatically onto its side, fully prepared to avoid productivity for another hour. Lucky beast. You shuffle to the edge of the room where the basin sits. It holds last night's water, lukewarm at best, icy at worst. You splash your face with it anyway, gasping softly as it hits your skin like divine punishment. Medieval mornings don't come with coffee, or fluffy robes, or podcasts. They come with duty, and judgment, especially if you slept too much. Because yes, there are rules about that. Too little sleep? Sloth. Too much? Also sloth. And worse, moral weakness. Monks were warned not to sleep past matins. Nobles were expected to rise early and be seen rising early. And if you were a peasant? Well, no one had time to judge you. You were up with the sun. Always. Work didn't wait. The church had opinions on sleep. Many, in fact. Priests preached that sleep was a sacred gift, but also a dangerous one. Sleep too deeply and you might miss God's call. Sleep too lightly and you were likely under spiritual attack. Sleep during sermons? A direct insult to the divine. One particularly fiery bishop insisted that anyone caught napping during Mass was kissing the devil's eyelids. Which sounds dramatic until you realize he caught half his congregation snoring during a 3-hour reading from Leviticus. Historians still debate how seriously these rules were enforced. In monasteries, yes, sleep was regimented, measured, and sometimes punished. In villages, probably more relaxed. People worked hard, No one begrudged a mid-morning nap if you'd been threshing wheat since dawn. But even rest had to be earned. Leisure was not free-floating. You couldn't just lounge about unless you were sick, dying, or nobility. And even they were expected to do so tastefully, reclining in robes. Reading psalms, not drooling on a haystack. You remember an old tale your grandfather told, the story of a man who overslept on a holy day. He dreamed of angels, feasts, and joy, but when he woke, the village had burned down, and everyone assumed he'd been cursed. The moral? Don't sleep through judgment, or fire. You move about your morning slowly, joints still resisting. You tie on your tunic, fasten your belt, and mutter the same half-formed prayer you say every day. Not from devotion, really, just tradition, habit, a spell to start the day. Nearby, someone is already stirring the embers in the hearth. The pot clinks. The smell of old bread and fresh ash fills the air. You rub your eyes and wonder if anyone will notice if you sneak in a nap later behind the cart shed. Probably not, unless it's Sunday, of course. Sunday naps are practically a sin. The church discouraged daytime sleeping unless it was for recovery or spiritual retreat. Napping after dinner was thought to weaken the body, dull the mind, and leave you vulnerable to temptation, or dreams, or both. Of course, people still did it, just like they slept in late when they could, just like they crept to bed early when the sky turned, just like you might sneak a snooze on a hay bale this afternoon, pretending to watch the oxen. Because despite the sermons and scoldings, people are people, tired, restless, human, and sleep happens. You look around one last time before stepping outside. The world is lighting up. Chickens strut, hooves clop, a bell rings far off in the next hamlet, signaling mass or market or maybe just someone who really likes bells. You take a breath. You made it through the medieval night, which means you're ready for the medieval day. More or less, the sun has risen, and with it, the buzz of another day. But you, dear listener, are slipping backward, back into the warmth of night, back into the shadows and scratchy linens and dreams of saints and screaming geese. Because tonight, we're not walking out into the fields or the market square. Tonight, we're curling inward, closing the shutters, letting the weight of everything you've heard settle like dust on an old wooden beam. And so, for one last time, you return to the bed. Not just any bed, but your bed. Wherever you are in this strange tapestry of medieval life. Maybe it's the straw-stuffed mattress of a tired peasant, layered with the scent of onions and shared with siblings, dogs, and unseen crawling companions. You know its lumps, its cool spots, the squeak of its ropes as you turn. The corner where someone definitely spilled ale 2 nights ago and swears they cleaned it. They didn't. Or maybe you're in a grander bed, tapestried and tall, fit for a baron or a bishop. You're wrapped in furs, perched on a pedestal, half watching candlelight tremble against the walls while some poor servant dozes in a chair with one eye open and a tray of wine cooling by his side. Wherever you are, you've felt the truth of sleep in this time. It is never fully private, never fully clean, never entirely yours. But still, it's essential. It is sacred. It's the time when you become nothing for a while. No titles, no hunger, no chores, just breath and body and perhaps, if you're lucky, a dream that doesn't end in confession. You lie back, let yourself feel the space again. The straw shifts underneath you. The scent of ashes and wool rises faintly in the air. Outside, an owl calls, late or early. It doesn't really matter. You wrap your blanket tighter, feeling its familiar weight across your shoulders. And then, an ache in your ankle, an itch near your elbow. You scratch, absently. Your other arm curls under your head. Your body remembers the shape of sleep. No matter the century, you remember the demon dreams, the amulets, the stars judging your REM cycle. You remember the sounds, snoring like a tavern brawl, whispers of stolen goats, someone sobbing softly about missing spoons. You remember the cold, the damp, the mornings steeped in guilt and piety and porridge. You remember it all, and yet now, at the end, you understand. Even in the discomfort, even in the noise, there is peace in this ritual. Because they, like you, just wanted rest. And that brings us here, now, to the final breath of the night. To the soft hush of rope beds and prayer-laced pillows. To the lull between first sleep and second. To the forgotten pause where time loses its grip and all that remains is the rhythm of your breath. The wind is quieter now. The shutters have stopped rattling. Even the fleas have gone still. Drunk on the buffet of medieval skin, you close your eyes. Let the images fade. The straw mattress melts into clouds. The amulet cools against your chest. The last candle sputters once, then dims. Everything is still. Everything is warm. Everything is gone. And now, with the last flicker of candlelight behind your eyes, you're free to drift. No more creaking ropes. No more coughing monks. No more worried glances at the moon or murmured confessions whispered through straw. Just rest. Let your limbs grow heavy, like they belong to the earth. Let the hum of history dissolve into something soft and weightless. Let the itch of the past quiet, and the clamor of centuries slip into a lullaby of breath and night. You are no longer in a one-room cottage, no longer curled in a drafty hall, no longer watched over by saints, servants, or curious lice. You are floating now, not in time, not in place, but in peace. The kind that transcends even cold feet and sour wool. The kind that doesn't care about sin or posture or midnight bells. The kind that says, you've made it. Through laughter, through nightmares, through whispering ghosts and overheard moans. You've made it, so let go. Sink deeper, and deeper still, until the rope beds are distant, until the straw no longer scratches, until all that remains is the breath, and the hush, and the silence between stars. Good night, traveler. Sleep well. You're safe now.